All right, so before we get into slope-intercept form, we're going to review slope and interpret the different ways that it can be represented and found. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to find the slope of a line on a graph from a table and using a formula. Let's find and classify the slope of a line. The definition of a slope is that it describes the steepness of a line. Slope is a ratio that compares the vertical and horizontal change of 2 points on a graph. It is represented by the letter m in an equation. The slope is the change in y over the change in x, which results in the rise over the run when moving from one point to another on a line. We can find the slope using the graph. Here we have a line and we've got two ordered pairs, which are our points, 2 points on the line. We can use the formula for rise over run by finding the change in the second y value minus the first one, and then the change for the x value, the second one minus the first one. So in this case, we have 6 minus 2, which is 4. That gives us our rise, and you can see that blue arrow is rising 4. And then for the run, we have 2 minus negative 4, which is actually 2 plus 4, and that gives us a positive 6, and that was represented by the red dotted line. So our rise over run is 4 over 6. There are 4 types of slope. The first type is a positive slope. You can tell by looking at the line, if you're reading it from left to right and it's going uphill, that results in a positive slope. In other words, the rise and run are both positive numbers. Negative slope is the second type. This is when you read the line from left to right and you're actually moving in a downhill motion, which means that your rise is actually negative, so you're going down. Your run is still positive, but the result is a negative number over a positive, which is still a negative slope. Then we have a horizontal and a vertical line. These lines don't have a slope, so their slope is 0. In this case, to form a horizontal line, you've got y equals some number, and that's it. That's your equation. And for a vertical line, it would be x equals some number, and that's your equation. Find the slope of the line that passes through the points -4 and 4 and 1 and -2. So here we have a graph with those points. As you can see, you can apply the formula for the change in y over the change in x. You can also move from one point to the next, left to right, and see that you have to go down 6 and over 5. So therefore the slope is -6 over 5. That's the rise over run. And you can perform the formula to do the same thing. -2 minus 4 is -6. 1 minus -4, which is 1 plus 4, equals 5. Slope-intercept form of a line. If you remember from earlier in this unit, the y-intercept is the point where a line crosses through the y-axis. In this case, the y-intercept is -2. You can write the equation of a line if you know the slope and the y-intercept of the line. The general form for this is y equals mx plus b. Remember that m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. M is also a coefficient, b is also a constant. This is the slope-intercept form of the line. Identify the slope and y-intercept of the equations below. The first one is already in y equals mx plus b form. So you would look at the coefficient, which is m, which is 3. That's the slope. So 3 over 1 is rise over run. -4 is the y-intercept. That's also the constant of the equation. So cross the y-axis at -4. The second one you need to rearrange to isolate y to get it in y equals mx plus b form. So I'll give you a moment to do that. You should result with y equals -4x plus 2. -4 is the slope. 2 is the y-intercept. The third one, you need to also rearrange to isolate y, so I'll let you do that. You should get y equals negative x, which is negative 1, plus 4. Y-intercept is 4. Slope is negative 1 over 1. Graph the equation 2x plus y equals 3 using the slope and the y-intercept. We must rearrange this to get it in y equals mx plus b form, which is our slope-intercept form, and we get y equals negative 2x plus 3. I like to start with my y-intercept, so I would start at positive 3. From there, I'm dropping down 2 and over 1, and I repeat that process until I have at least 2 points to form the line. Let's try this again. Here you have 2 more examples. Work these out, come back and check your answers. You should have gotten a line that crosses at negative 3. Your slope is positive 2, so you're rising 2 and going over 1. Rising 2, going over 1. And there's your line. The next one, you should have a y-intercept of positive 2. From there, you're rising 1 and going over 2. Again, another positive slope results for this line. Let's use graphs to write our equations by working backwards. So we can see that the first one, it has a y-intercept of negative 4. From there, we have a rise of 3 over 3, which is the same as 1. Our equation is y equals 1x minus 4. Write the next 2 equations and come back to check your answers. You should have gotten a y-intercept of 2. Slope is 1/3, so your equation is y equals 1/3 x plus 2. The next one should have resulted in y equals negative 1/4 x plus 3. Let's look at how we find slope and intercept from a table. When you're given the data in the table, you can use it to find the slope and y-intercept of the line that it would make. Then you can write the equation in slope-intercept form. When given a graph, oftentimes people revert to plotting the points they see in the table, and from there they use the graph to write the equation. We can look at the table and interpret that when x is 0, y is negative 1, and that is our y-intercept. So we automatically know that our equation is going to be y equals something x minus 1. What we need to know is the slope. And going back to the formula for finding slope, we can look at 2 x values and 2 y values, find the change or the difference between them, and that's our rise over run. So in this case, I'll just pick the second value, and it doesn't matter. You can just pick 2 values from the table. I'll pick the second y value, which is negative 1, and I'll subtract 4, or negative 4, excuse me, so I'm actually adding. Negative 1 minus negative 4 is positive 3. 0 minus negative 1 is positive 1. So that results in a slope of 3 over 1. That's a positive slope. What we get is y equals 3x minus 1. Let's do the same thing using these tables to write our equations in slope-intercept form. In the first table, we don't have a value for, or a 0 value for x. So we need to find the pattern so that we can create one so that we know where the line crosses the y-axis. Let's work that out. Come back and check your answer. As you probably noticed, each time the x value decreased by 1, the y value decreased or increased by 3. So if we continue that pattern, that means that the equation is going to be have a y-intercept of positive 8. And then you can find the slope using the rise over run formula that we've been doing before. Same thing for the second equation. We actually know that the y-intercept is at 0. And that tells us that it's going to pass through the origin, because when x is 0, y is 0, so that's the origin of the graph. Go ahead and work out the equation for this one and check your answer when you're finished. Okay, we've already talked about how we would find those, use the pattern to find the 0 for the y-intercept and the slopes. Now you're going to do some practice. You can check in with your table mates when they're finished with the video. Work quietly and whisper until everyone is done watching the video and taking their notes. These 2 pages will be completed by the end of tomorrow or our next class period. Thank you. Enjoy.